Give me just 2 minutes of your time and I'll make a case for why protest marches are no longer effective in the modern era and what we can do instead. We're doing this with no shade and no particular ideology, just history and practical facts. The purely performative protest march is something that is, relatively speaking, historically new. If you go back, 100 years and before that, marches of that kind, people got together because they were going to march to somewhere, to someone, and ask them to do something. And if that person didn't do it, there was an inherent threat, which means that it was actually more of a direct action. It was a direct challenge to power. Then, of course, policing became more and more militarized, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get to the civil rights movement and nonviolent marches, which were still a show of force and also came with them some threat of boycotts and of actual political power being harnessed. And there was something that was actually being demanded. And another important thing to consider is that in the civil rights era, it coincided with the spread of television. So when they would go someplace and the cops would do what cops do, it was the first time that a lot of people had seen that live on television in their own homes. And even if they weren't, the best people and didn't really care about the marginalized, there really is something to be said for, as a society, that stuff being seen for the first time. And it doesn't matter as much what is in people's hearts as we, believe it to. As long as they're willing to do and back the right thing, I really don't care what they think. I digress. And there's something to be said for the fact that all protest marches, even in the civil rights movement, were inherently performative. Performative not meaning bad or useless, just that it was a performance. It was something to show people. It wasn't meant to change power directly or to threaten power directly, but to change hearts and minds and or to get more people on side, to actually move the flow of power with the particular performance of marching to or from someplace and whatever happening. But right now, in this current era, we've already seen all of the horrible stuff we're ever going to see, right? And we've been desensitized to it at this point. So that doesn't have as much of an effect on people, if any. The financial takeover of our voting and economic and political systems is complete. So politicians don't care how many people march because they don't care. We're not the ones who are paying their salaries. So when you get a bunch of people out into the streets with no demand being made, no actual critique of the system itself, and preventing us from having to do this again in X period of time, and also the amount of money that is spent on these things. I mean, I'm calling these Black Saturday events because it is just a bonanza payday for capitalism. People are traveling, people are spending, they're out there buying from the same corporations who are contributing to their enslavement and making them have to march in the first place. So, practically speaking, if all the people who had participated in the protests yesterday had instead stayed home and helped with community gardens, created some sort of local childcare thing, some way for people to get their needs met, some sort of mutual aid, local mutual aid, only spent their money with local or small businesses and boycotted and canceled Amazon Prime subscriptions and things like that, we would have moved the world. We're past the point of changing hearts and minds because we are in a fascist government right now, right? They don't care. And in fact, when we fall into the peaceful protesters narrative that has been pushed, then people go to actions like the one that happened yesterday, think that they participated, and then go back to consuming and laboring for the empire, and nothing changes. And even what's worse, then the people who stay to actually stop people from getting yoinked up by ICE, to block police, to actually do actions rather than just, protest parades, then they get demonized as looters and rioters. And the people who went during the day and then made it home in time for the nightly news fight them as well and talk shit about them as well. We have the internet now, and most power is actually moved electronically by money. And yet we still have not updated our systems to get away from the idea that it feels nice to be standing in a big crowd of people. It feels nice to feel the swell of people's hearts and, to hear the feet and the voices and to just, that's why people like concerts. And unfortunately, these protest parades, with most of them with literal parade permits, have become something like that for activism. And they have become something that is a part of the overculture. They have essentially co-opted the entire idea under our noses. The value of protest is it is either a threat to power or a way to genuinely shift power. I contend that the organized protests yesterday did neither. There is not one single building to storm. There is not one single neck to wring. Power is moved now electronically, digitally, and also, of course, within community, but those connections are still made digitally, right? Most of the meetings that you're going to go to are to solidify plans that have already been made. We need to update our internal systems to include the fact that not only is the internet real, not only is the digital online world real, but we are not using it as effectively as we could be using to actually challenge, threaten, and topple power. And that's what we need to be doing.